The chains ordered. The galaxy had always whispered about the young queen. She was only 23, yet she ruled a vast empire of alien worlds. Her crown was heavy, her throne made of stone and silver, and her people expected her to be strong. But inside her heart she often felt the weight of doubt. Her throne room was filled with alien nobles, tall figures with shining robes and eyes that glowed in the shadows. They bowed before her. They praised her commands, but whispers ran through the palace. Whispers that the queen was still untested. Too young, too soft, too proud, she wanted to prove them wrong. That day, the palace gates opened with a loud crash. Guards dragged in a prisoner. But this was no ordinary prisoner. This was a human, a being from a death world, a creature spoken of in hushed tones by alien scholars. Some called humans dangerous, others called them reckless, but all agreed they were unpredictable. The queen raised her hand, her voice sharp. "Bring him before me." Her guards shoved the human forward, chains clinking on his wrists, yet his eyes were calm, his steps steady. It was as if he had walked into the throne room of his own free will. The alien nobles gasped, their tails flicking, their mandibles clicking, their wings trembling. They expected fear. They expected the human to kneel or cry, but instead he stood tall, his eyes meeting the queen's without a hint of weakness. The queen narrowed her gaze, her voice cold. "Chains, make them tighter. Let him remember he is nothing here." She wanted to see him break, to see him beg, to show her court that she was in control, but the human only smiled, the corners of his lips curving as if he knew a secret no one else did. His voice carried across the throne room, simple, steady. "I came here willingly." Shock spread across the chamber, whispers burst like fire. The nobles hissed in disbelief, some even stepped back. How could a prisoner claim he walked into captivity by choice? The queen's heart skipped a beat. Though her face showed no weakness, "You lie," she declared. No human would give himself so easily. The man tilted his head, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then ask yourself, queen, why would I lie?" Her hand trembled slightly. Hidden beneath the folds of her gown, she was young, yes, but not foolish. This human carried himself differently. Not like a beaten slave, not like a desperate man, but like a warrior who had already seen death and laughed at it. The court advisors stepped forward. One hissed, "Your Majesty, do not believe him. Humans are tricksters. Bind him to the floor, silence him before he poisons the court with his words." Another shouted, "Humans are death worlders. They survive storms that would kill us all. Do not let him speak." The queen listened but kept her eyes on the human. His calmness unsettled her more than his chains. He stood as though the throne itself belonged to him, as though the guards around him were nothing. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice quieter, almost a whisper. "Why would you walk into my throne room willingly?" The human's smile faded, but his gaze grew sharper. "Because this empire does not know the storm that is coming. Your chains mean nothing. Your throne means nothing. And when the storm arrives, you will wish you had listened." The nobles hissed in rage, their voices clashing like blades. "He threatens you," they cried. "Kill him now." But the queen raised her hand, silencing them. Her chest tightened, fear and curiosity battling inside her. She should have ordered his execution. Yet something in his tone made her pause. The human lowered his chain slightly, the metal scraping against the floor, and he whispered words that made the queen's blood run cold. "You think you hold me, queen, but look around. It is I who hold you." For a moment, silence swallowed the great throne room. The nobles froze. The guards looked at one another. The young queen's heart pounded, and in that silence, she realized this human was not like the others. He had not come to beg for mercy. He had not come to bow. He had come with purpose, a purpose she did not yet understand, but one that made her throne feel smaller than it ever had before. The queen straightened her crown, forcing her voice to remain firm. "We will see," she said. "Lock him in the hall. Tomorrow I will decide his fate." The human bowed his head slightly, not in surrender but in mock respect. And as the guards dragged him away, his words echoed in her mind. "You have no idea who really holds the chains. The human who smiles at chains." The night inside the queen's palace was heavy with whispers. Servants hurried through dark halls, speaking in low voices, their words carrying fear. The alien nobles gathered in private rooms, their eyes darting with suspicion. All of them wondered the same thing. Who was this human who dared to smile in chains? The queen sat alone in her chamber, her crown resting on a golden stand beside her. The words of the human still echoed in her mind. "You think you hold me, but I hold you." She clenched her fists, anger burning in her chest, but beneath the anger was something else, something far more dangerous: curiosity. When morning came, the throne hall filled once again. Nobles lined the walls. Guards stood ready with energy spears. The queen entered in her silver robe, her face sharp and cold, but inside she felt the weight of every eye. She could not look weak, not now. The guards dragged the human in, the chains clattering against the polished floor. Yet even with wrists bound, he walked with the grace of a man who feared nothing. The nobles hissed. Some spat curses, one shouted, "Death-world vermin," but the human did not react. He only smiled. That smile unsettled everyone. The queen included. It was not the grin of madness, nor the grin of arrogance. It was calm, confident, like a man who had already measured every soul in the room and found them wanting. The queen leaned forward on her throne, her voice cutting like ice. "Why do you smile?" The human looked up, his eyes steady. "Because you mistake chains for power, and fear for respect." The court erupted in outrage. Nobles screeched, claws scraped, wings flapped. The advisors begged her to silence him, yet she raised her hand and they obeyed, though their eyes burned with anger. The queen studied him, each word striking her deeper than she wished. "You dare mock me in my own hall," she said. "I mock nothing," the human replied, his voice calm. "I only tell you what you refuse to see. Your empire is made of glass and storms do not bow to crowns." His words spread like fire. The nobles whispered nervously. Some looked at each other with unease. He spoke not like a prisoner, but like a prophet, as if he had already seen the end of their world. The queen felt her chest tighten, but she did not let it show. Instead she stood, her silver robe trailing across the steps of her throne. Her voice rang out, "You speak of storms, human, but you are nothing here. You are bound. You are alone." The human's smile widened. "Alone, perhaps, but bound. Never." And with a sudden movement he pulled against the chains. The sound of metal straining filled the chamber. Gasps echoed. The noble stepped back, yet the chains did not break. Not yet. But the sight of his strength was enough to make every guard tighten their grip on their spears. The queen's heart skipped a beat, but she forced her voice steady. "You are strong, yes, but strength alone cannot save you. Tomorrow you will be judged, and your fate sealed." The human bowed his head slightly, though not in submission. "Tomorrow, yes, but do not think it is only my fate that will be decided." The room grew tense. The queen sat back, her face unreadable, yet her mind swirled with doubt. The human's words dug into her like knives. Her empire was vast, her fleets were many. Yet why did his voice make her question everything? When the guards dragged him away again, the nobles shouted for blood. Some cried for his head to be displayed on the palace walls, but the queen only raised her hand, silencing them once more. "No," she said, her voice firm. "He will live, at least for now." Whispers filled the hall, some accusing her of weakness, others wondering if she had a hidden plan, but none dared challenge her openly. As the human disappeared through the great doors, his voice drifted back one last time, soft yet sharp enough for all to hear. "Remember, queen, chains break, but truths remain." That night the queen stood at her balcony, staring at the stars, the palace below her silent, her empire stretching beyond her sight. Yet her mind was trapped on a single question. Why had a human, alone and chained, walked into her throne with such calmness? Why had he smiled, and deep in her heart, though she would never admit it, a shadow of fear began to grow? The silent throne. The throne hall was quiet the next day. Too quiet, the queen sat high upon her silver seat, her crown catching the pale light of the twin moons shining through the glass ceiling. Yet her mind was far from steady. The human's words from the day before clung to her thoughts like chains of their own. The nobles gathered once again, their eyes sharp, their tongues eager for judgment. They wanted blood. They wanted proof that their young queen was strong enough to crush this human, before he poisoned the empire with doubt. But the queen did not speak, not at once. She let the silence hang heavy, as if even the air itself was listening. Her eyes rested on the empty space where the human should have stood. The guards had not yet brought him in, and that delay made the court restless. Finally, the doors creaked open. The human entered, still in chains, still surrounded by guards, yet still carrying himself as though he walked into a place that already belonged to him. His head lifted, his smile faint but steady. He stood before the throne, the nobles hissing with disgust, and yet when he raised his eyes to meet the queen's, the chamber fell quiet again, as if his presence demanded silence without a word. The queen's voice rang out, clear and sharp. You stand in my hall, human, chained as a prisoner, yet you act as though you own it. Why? The human tilted his head, his eyes scanning the nobles, the guards, and finally settling on the queen. Because thrones are not built from stone or silver, they are built from truth. And truth bends for no crown. A murmur spread across the court. The nobles clutched at their robes. Some hissed threats, but the queen raised her hand. Silencing them, her heart beat faster. She hated that his words struck her so deeply. You speak of truth, she said, her voice low. Then tell me this truth you claim to hold. What storm do you speak of? What danger could shake an empire such as mine? The human smiled, his voice steady as he answered. The danger does not come from the stars, Queen. It comes from the shadows already in this hall. The nobles gasped, their eyes darting, their claws twitching. One shouted lies, he twists words to confuse us, but others looked nervous, their eyes avoiding the queen's. The queen narrowed her gaze, anger and fear twisting inside her. You accuse my own court, she demanded. The human nodded. Yes, I do, because I have seen it before. Empires do not fall by enemies outside. They fall by betrayal inside. His voice grew darker. And I tell you now, there are those here who would rather see you chained than crowned. The hall erupted in shouts. Accusations flying. The nobles turned on one another, claws and voices clashing, the sound rising like a storm itself. But the queen slammed her staff against the throne. The chamber shook with the sound. Silence returned, though heavy and trembling. She looked at the human with a mixture of fury and unease. You play a dangerous game, she whispered. The human leaned forward, his chains clinking softly, his eyes unblinking. I do not play games, Queen, I reveal them. His words made her shiver, though she kept her face cold. She did not want him to see the crack in her armor. She turned to the guards, her voice sharp. Take him away, hold him under watch. No one speaks to him without my command. The guards obeyed, dragging the human toward the doors, yet as he passed through the hall, his voice drifted back one last time, cutting through the silence. When the storm breaks, remember this moment. Remember that I warned you from your own throne. The doors closed. The hall trembled with the echoes of his words. The nobles argued again, some demanding his death, others whispering fears that he spoke the truth. The queen sat still, her crown heavy, her hands tight upon the arms of the throne. She did not speak. She did not move. She only stared at the space where the human had stood, the silence around her growing heavier with every breath, and in that silence, she realized something that terrified her more than the human's smile, more than his chains, more than his words. Her throne no longer felt like hers. The first crack in the crown, the queen did not sleep that night. Her palace tower overlooked the glowing city, thousands of alien lights shining like stars below, but her mind could not rest. The human's words echoed again and again. There are those here who would rather see you chained than crowned. She wanted to dismiss it as lies, as tricks from a clever prisoner. Yet the unease in her heart grew. She had seen the nobles argue. She had seen their eyes avoid hers. She had heard whispers in corridors long before the human ever arrived. By dawn, her court gathered once more. They spoke loudly of war preparations, of trade, of the throne's honor. Yet she noticed their voices too sharp, their glances too quick, and her doubts deepened. The human was brought in again, his chains heavy, his eyes calm as ever. He stood in the center of the throne hall, and though guards surrounded him, it felt as though he was the one who commanded the space, not her. The queen lifted her chin, her voice steady. You spoke of betrayal in this hall. Prove it. Give me names. The human's eyes swept across the nobles. Many shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. His voice was soft but sharp. Proof does not come from my mouth, Queen. It will come from their actions, the nobles shouted in protest. One slammed his staff. This is a trick, Majesty. He seeks to divide us. Another hissed. He is a human, a death-world liar. Kill him before he poisons more minds. The queen silenced them with a wave of her hand, her heart heavy. Then show me, human, what actions will reveal them. The human's smile returned. Faint but dangerous. Bring word of false victory. Tell your court of fleets that never existed. And watch who smiles. Watch who hurries to spread it. Betrayal is always eager. The hall grew restless. The queen felt a chill in her bones. She dismissed the court for the day, but as the nobles left, she noticed how some whispered more than others, how some hurried away too quickly, and her doubts grew sharper. That evening, reports arrived from the border worlds, enemy fleets gathering in secret, the very storm the human had spoken of. Her generals urged her to prepare to send fleets, but their eyes too were filled with uncertainty. Some avoided her questions. Some gave half-truths. The queen stood alone in her chamber, her crown feeling heavier than ever. She thought of the human, chained yet unbroken, speaking truths that no one dared say aloud. And for the first time she wondered if her chains of tradition, her nobles, her advisors, were truly loyal to her throne. The next morning, she entered the council hall, her silver robe flowing, her staff striking the floor with authority. The nobles bowed low, but she saw it, a flicker in their eyes, a shadow of doubt. She turned to her guards. "Bring the human." When he entered, still in chains, still calm, she spoke louder than before. "My council doubts your words, but I will test them. I will see with my own eyes who stands with me and who seeks my fall." The human bowed his head slightly, his voice like steel. "Then watch carefully, Queen, for cracks spread fastest when the crown is heavy." Later that day, false news was released as the human had suggested. The Queen declared that her fleets had destroyed enemy scouts, that victory was already near. She watched the nobles, their reactions swift and telling. Some cheered too quickly, some smiled too wide, and whispers spread before the court had even ended. Hours later, hidden messages were intercepted. Secret communications from those same nobles who celebrated loudest. Messages sent to unknown contacts beyond her borders. Messages that betrayed her throne. The Queen's chest tightened. Fury burned in her veins. The human had been right that night. She summoned her private guard, her orders cold as iron. "Watch them. Every word, every step, every whisper. I will know who poisons my crown." But as she stood once again in her silent chamber, she realized something even darker. The first crack had already appeared, not only in her crown but in her heart. She no longer trusted her court, and the voice that echoed in her mind was not her advisors. It was the human's chains may have bound his body, but it was her throne that felt bound now. The storm beyond the stars. The palace trembled with unease. The whispers of betrayal had spread like cracks through glass. But before the Queen could confront her nobles, darker news arrived. Messengers rushed into the throne hall, their faces pale, their voices shaking. "Your Majesty," one cried, falling to his knees. "Enemy fleets gather at the edge of our stars, worlds burn. Colonies fall silent." Gasps filled the hall. Nobles shouted over one another, some demanding immediate war, others urging retreat. Fear rippled through the chamber, and in that storm of panic the young Queen sat frozen, her crown heavy upon her brow. Her eyes shifted to the prisoner standing in chains, the human. He said nothing, but his calm gaze cut through the chaos like a blade. The Queen raised her staff, her voice sharp. Silence. The hall fell quiet, though fear still churned in every heart. She turned to the human, her anger mixed with desperation. "This is the storm you spoke of, is it not?" The human nodded slowly. "Yes, Queen. But this storm was not born outside. It was welcomed by betrayal inside." The nobles roared in protest, their claws clicking, their voices filled with rage. "Lies, manipulation," they shouted, but others looked pale, their eyes flickering with guilt. The Queen's voice trembled with fury. "You dare tell me my empire burns because of traitors in my own court?" The human smile was faint, yet it held no mockery, only certainty. "Empires do not fall by force alone. They fall because their roots are rotten, I warned you. And now the fire climbs your throne." Her heart thundered, she wanted to deny it. Yet the intercepted messages from the night before haunted her. The false victory had revealed cracks. Cracks now wide enough for enemies to exploit. A general stepped forward, his armor shining, his voice steady. "Majesty, we must send the Grand Fleet. Crush the enemy before they reach the capital." Others shouted in agreement, desperate to act, desperate to show strength. But the human spoke again, his voice calm but cutting. "Send your fleet and you will lose it. The storm is larger than you imagine. Your enemies wait for you to strike blindly, and when you do, they will gut your empire in one sweep." The hall exploded in outrage. Nobles demanded his silence. One advisor screamed, "Why listen to a human? He is a prisoner, a liar, a beast of war." Yet the Queen could not ignore the truth in his voice. His warnings had proven true once before. Her doubts grew heavier, the silence in her heart louder than the shouts around her. She rose from her throne, her robe flowing like liquid silver, her eyes sharp. "Enough. I will see the truth with my own eyes. Bring me the star maps." The guards activated the great hollow table. Glowing lights filled the chamber, showing fleets gathering at her borders. enemy forces moving like shadows across the stars. Her generals argued over strategies, but her eyes caught something else, a pattern hidden but clear. The enemy's movements matched too perfectly with the messages she had intercepted. They knew her borders too well, too precise, too exact. Her blood ran cold. Betrayal was no longer a whisper. It was written in the stars. She turned toward the human once more, her voice shaking. "If you speak the truth, then tell me what must be done." The nobles cried out in protest. "Majesty, do not ask him, he is the enemy." But her hand silenced them. Her eyes fixed on the human. The man raised his head, his chains rattling softly. "First, you must stop listening to liars in robes. Second, you must see beyond the borders of your empire. For the storm is not just against you. It is against every throne that stands alone." The queen's chest tightened. She saw the truth in his words. Her empire was strong, but not strong enough to fight the storm alone. She clenched her fists, fury burning in her heart. "If what you say is true, then I cannot fight this war without help. But who will stand with me?" The human smile returned. Slow and steady humanity. The hall fell silent. The word itself carried weight. The nobles shivered, some cursed, some hissed. "Impossible," they said. "Humans are monsters. Humans are unpredictable. No one allies with them." But the queen remembered the calm in his eyes, the strength in his voice, the unbroken spirit in his chains, and she wondered, perhaps monsters were what she needed. Her gaze hardened. "Take him away," she ordered, her voice cold. "But do not harm him." As the guards dragged him out, the human spoke one last time, his words echoing through the chamber like thunder. "When the storm reaches your throne, Queen, remember this. Only chains strong enough to bind the galaxy together will save you, and only humans know how to forge them." The doors closed, and the queen sat in silence, the nobles whispering in fear, her crown heavy as never before. She stared at the star maps, the storm beyond the stars growing closer, and for the first time, she feared her empire would not survive without the very prisoner she had tried to chain. The human unchained, the storm finally arrived. The queen stood on the balcony of her war tower as alarms echoed across the capital. The sky lit up with streaks of fire. Enemy ships breaking through the first line of defense. Her proud fleets, the fleets she trusted for her empire's safety, fell one after another. Reports flooded her throne hall, voices shaking with fear. "The eastern sector is lost. Our ships are outnumbered. The shields collapse within hours." Generals barked orders. Nobles screamed for escape. The palace shook with the thunder of distant bombardments. The young queen gripped her staff tight, her silver robe heavy upon her shoulders. Her empire was crumbling before her eyes, and in the shadows of the hall, chained but unbroken, the human stood watching, his calm eyes fixed on her. At last she turned to him, her voice low, trembling but sharp. "You spoke of this storm, and now it burns my skies. Tell me, human, is this the fate you warned of?" He nodded slowly, his voice steady even as the world shook around them. "Yes, Queen, this is the price of ignoring truth. Your fleets fall because your crown is blind. Your empire bleeds because your throne is alone." Her heart pounded. She hated his words, yet she knew they were true. Every battle report proved it. Her empire could not stand against this storm. Her generals looked at her with fear. Her nobles whispered of fleeing, and in that moment, the queen realized there was only one voice in the hall that did not shake. Only one figure who still stood tall, even in chains. She clenched her fists, her crown heavy, her pride screaming, but her voice finally broke free. "If you can save my empire, then speak. What must I do?" The human stepped forward, the chains rattling like thunder, his eyes sharp. "Unchain me." The hall erupted in outrage. Nobles screamed, "Majesty!" "No. He will betray us. He is death itself." But their voices no longer reached her heart. She raised her staff, silencing them all, her eyes locked on the human. "If I release you, how do I know you will not turn against me?" The human's smile returned, faint and steady. "Because if I wanted your throne, Queen, I would already be sitting on it." The words struck her deeper than any blade. Her breath caught. She knew he was right. Even in chains, he commanded silence. Even bound, he made her court tremble. Her decision burned inside her, pride fighting against survival. Yet the bombardments outside grew louder. The shields cracked, her empire bled, and she knew she had no choice. "Unlock him," she commanded, her voice like iron. The guards hesitated, fear in their eyes, but her voice rose louder. "Do it now." With trembling hands, they unlocked the chains one by one. The heavy shackles clattered to the floor, and with each sound, the hall grew quieter. until at last the human stood free. He did not kneel. He did not bow. He only rolled his shoulders, stretching as though the chains had been nothing more than dust. The nobles shrank back, their eyes wide. Some whispered in terror, some in awe. The queen's heart pounded, her voice sharp. "Now show me, human. Show me the strength you claim can stand against this storm." The human turned toward the great hollow table. His fingers danced across controls as if he had known them all his life. The maps of fleets and stars shifted. He moved with speed and confidence that stunned the generals. He gave orders like a commander who had led countless wars. "Your ships must not fight head-on," he said. "They must strike like shadows, cut supply, break formation. Let the enemy bleed itself before you face them. And when they are weak, then you strike with fury." The generals hesitated, but the queen's voice cut through. "Do as he commands." Reluctantly, they obeyed. Ships were redirected. Fleets pulled back into new positions, and within hours the tide began to shift. Enemy forces slowed. Their lines stretched thin. Their advance faltered. The queen watched from her throne, her breath unsteady. The human stood beside the glowing star map. Calm and certain, every move he made turned despair into hope. At last he turned to her, his eyes sharp, his voice low. "This is only the beginning, Queen, if you want to survive this storm. You will need more than fleets, you will need allies. And humanity will be the first." Her chest tightened. Her pride wavered, but she nodded slowly. For the first time she accepted the truth. The human was no longer her prisoner, no longer her chained enemy. He was the only weapon strong enough to save her crown. And though she still wore the silver crown upon her head, the throne did not feel hers anymore, not fully, because beside her now stood a man who carried no crown, no robe, no chains, and yet commanded the weight of empires. The throne shared, the war burned across the stars, but for the first time, the young queen's fleets did not shatter. They struck like shadows as the human commanded. They moved with precision. They struck where the enemy was weakest. Every battle reshaped the tide. The nobles watched with wide eyes, fear and awe mixing in their voices. Whispers spread through the palace, whispers that the queen had unleashed a storm of her own, not of fire or steel, but of humanity. The queen stood in her war chamber, her crown heavy but her heart steady for the first time in weeks. She looked at the human standing beside the star maps, his eyes sharp, his voice calm as he directed her fleets as though the stars themselves were his soldiers. Reports arrived one after another. Enemy lines broken, supply ships destroyed, colonies retaken. The storm that once seemed unstoppable was now stumbling. At last, the enemy made one final desperate push toward the capital, their largest fleet cutting through the void like a black tide. The nobles panicked, the generals hesitated, but the human only smiled. "Now," he said, "is when we break them." He led the queen to the great balcony of the war tower. From there, she could see the endless fire in the skies above her world, the thunder of war echoing across the heavens. The human stood beside her. No crown, no throne, no chains, yet his presence steadied her heart. The enemy fleet descended, and the queen's heart pounded, but then she saw it. Ships appearing in the dark, massive warships, their design unlike any she had ever seen. Cold black steel with the insignia of Earth. Human warships, they emerged from the void like monsters from legend, their weapons glowing with terrible light, their engines shaking the stars. The nobles gasped in terror. Some fell to their knees. The general stared in disbelief. The queen turned to the human, her voice barely a whisper. "You called them." He nodded, his eyes never leaving the battle. "Humanity does not chain its own, queen, when one of us is held. All of us come." The war that followed was unlike any the queen had ever seen. Human warships tore through the enemy lines, their firepower unmatched, their fury unbroken. Her fleets followed their lead. Together they crushed the invaders. The storm that had threatened her throne shattered in the blaze of human steel. When the last enemy ship fell, silence spread across the palace. The nobles trembling, the generals speechless. The queen herself stood frozen, her crown gleaming in the firelight of victory. Slowly, she turned to the human, her voice soft, heavy with awe. "You saved my empire." The human finally looked at her, his smile faint but steady. "No, queen, humanity saved itself, and in saving ourselves, we saved you." Her heart trembled, her pride battled her gratitude. Yet she could not deny the truth. Without him, without humanity, her throne would have already been ash and dust. In the throne hall that night, the nobles gathered, their voices hushed, their eyes wide as the queen entered. The human walked beside her, no longer in chains, no longer a prisoner. The hall grew silent. She sat upon her throne, the silver crown upon her head. But when the human stopped at her side, the hall seemed to bow to him as much as to her. His presence commanded respect that no crown could demand. The queen's voice rang out. Today my empire stands because of humanity, because of the man you once called prisoner. Remember this, no chain can hold humanity. No throne can silence them, and no empire can stand without them. The nobles lowered their heads, some in shame, some in reverence, and then the human did something that shook the galaxy. He did not kneel, he did not bow. Instead, he stepped up the throne dais and sat beside her, not on her throne, but beside it, as if a second throne had always waited there. The queen did not stop him. She only glanced at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself a faint smile, not of pride, but of respect. The galaxy would remember that image forever. The young alien queen crowned in silver, and beside her a human with no crown, no chains, no throne of his own, yet treated as an equal. From that day the galaxy whispered a new truth. The queen was not alone upon her throne, for humanity had claimed its place, not as slaves, not as prisoners, not as subjects, but as allies. And when empires spoke of power, when rulers spoke of crowns, they also spoke of the day the human walked into a throne room willingly, and left it unchained, seated beside a queen,